The Innovations in Soil Science presentations are funded by the Australian Government's National Landcare program and was delivered by Soil Science Australia, Agriculture Victoria and Gecko Clan Landcare Network. The following presentation is introduced by Brad Costin from Agriculture Victoria.
Sue's a service specialist agronomist and here is to talk to us about sampling and soil sampling guidelines. Over to you, Sue.
So I work for CSBP and our lab is based in WA. It's a new role they created for me, well not just for me, but they created about 4 years ago, and I'm on the ground just guiding people to get a good sample to the lab so we can analyse it, because I talk to a lot of different agros, different people, researchers, and everyone has a different opinion on how they sample and their sampling guidelines on how they take that sample, and my role is trying to get a really good sample getting over there so we can analyse it. A lot of my talk today is really going to come from, and it's down the bottom there, Guide Fit for Purpose for Soil Sampling for Care Australia. I don't know if any of you agros, I'm going to talk to the agros here in the room, have seen that guideline, that booklet. It's a really good documentation to bring all this information together. So I'm going to pull bits and pieces from that. And I'm also going to talk about what some of the customers do, because I always ask everyone how they sample, what they do and that sort of stuff. So I'm going to bring some of what they're doing as well. So I think Jason mentioned it and someone else mentioned it today. Our biggest source of error in soil testing is really the sampling technique. So once we get to the lab, I think Jim mentioned it actually, the lab we have a little bit of plus and minus of the results, but the biggest area will come from our sampling technique. And so you can see that's a diagram from the booklet, and they say, we've got 6,000 tonnes in our paddock, we collect hopefully 5 to 10 kilos, we send, nobody sends 500 kilos to the lab, I'm afraid, and analyse 10 grams. And I thought last night, I'd put up our dry weight, our minimum dry weight for those tests. And those tests are probably the tests that you utilise in your normal agricultural packages. So if you look, your nitrate nitrogen tests are about 20 grams of, and I say prepared dry weight. So that's been dried and ground, so we need about 20 grams to do that analysis. So if you look down the list, phosphorus is 10, sulphur is only 5 grams, so is our organic carbon and TOC, they only need 5 grams. XCATs are 15 grams, and your PHEC, because we do that together, we bundled that's 50 grams. Now, I was at a field day or somewhere a few or 4 weeks ago in southern New South Wales, and a farmer commented about grid sampling. Sorry, Zach, it's not about you, but they found out that grid sampler guys were just taking enough sample to meet these guidelines. So they're not taking the number of cores, they're just taking enough sample to send that over. So that was really concerning when I heard that from a farmer, because they witnessed it in the paddock. It's not Zach, but it is happening out there, so it's something to take into account. So I'm going to start off with my take-home messages, because you probably all fall asleep by the end and I really want to get these out first. Biggest take-home messages is to have a clear example why you're sampling. Now, majority of the time it's going to be for your fertiliser, inform your fertiliser decisions, but Jason's talked today and he's going, we will need different sampling guidelines for our pH if we've got a pH concern. Now carbon's come into the play, we need a different sampling guidelines for carbon. So please don't ring up and say, can I just add to TOC and then work out my tonnes of carbon off my 0 to 10, because you just can't do that. So have a clear reason why you're sampling. You want to make it repeatable. So we've got the technology, phones, every bit of bloody device out there, you can GPS that sample. And I really would like the agros in the room to share that GPS location with the sample, with the farmer. Now, they might give two hoots about it, But if comments I've got from a lot of different talks from growers on the ground is that with the retailers, the agros change quite often. They have a revolving door of different agros. And so when they go back to get their next soil test, it can't be repeatable because there's no record. So if you share that with them, they can share that with the next person or whoever they want to. So it'd be really great if you share that data. Sample at the same time of the year. Someone mentioned that. I think Helen did. Thank you. That's the same with you guys. Sample the same time of the year. Someone asked me that question yesterday. When's a good time to sample? I always say sample when it suits the grower, when you know that they're going to have time to do it. So don't, with the grazing producers, if they do it themselves, don't put it in the middle of lambing or calving because they just won't get time. The sampling is to the sample depths to adhere your interpretation guidelines and the agriculture industry. So your horticulture will have a different depth compared to your cropping and so forth. Take the appropriate number cores for that representative sample. So I've already said that example. It really is really important to take that. I know it takes a lot longer to take the cores, but it is very important. Sample location. Talk to the grower. They know the paddock better than anybody, so that's all I can say. And you can use the technology available, and I will go through some of the stuff that some of the people are using that I talk to. And then sample handling, so make sure your equipment and hands are clean. And for some reason, we have I get questions, and it's questions about handling of lately and how cool, or should I air dry my sample before I send it, or should I dry it and so forth. I'm getting a lot of questions about that of late. So that's, you either keep it cool, air dry it, or dry it really quick before you send it to the lab. You've got three options. I've asked the senior chemist, and they just impact your nitrogen and your carbon results really. And then the lab, when you select a lab, develop a relationship with them. So, that's for when you've got that relationship, you can ring up and ask questions. When you're stuck on something, or you want to know about a test, or you want to get a repeat, make sure you've got that good relationship. So don't keep swapping and changing labs, which you probably don't because you are locked in because of your businesses. But, when you've got a lab, just stick with it. Okay, so first one, I've already said it, but I'm going to repeat myself because, this is what I'm going to be talking about. So it is have a clear reason why you're sampling. So is it for fertiliser? You do a sampling for that. Is it for the, understanding your subsurface acidity? Do your sampling for that. Is it for carbon? Do your sampling for that. I know you're going out sampling more, but there are different guidelines for each one. This is from the guide. So your predictive is, we're benchmarking those results against interpretation guidelines. With your monitoring, do people do monitoring tests at all, that sort of stuff? The diagnostics is you're collecting your poor and good sites of the paddock, and also include a tissue test as well, because your soil test will tell you what the constraints are in the soil. Your tissue test will tell you what the plant can actually take up from the soil. So it's a good way to put both of them together. And then, the compliance. The options are there. You can, the gold star is to soil test every paddock every year, and, the cost of that's unreal. But if you just sample the analytes that you're concerned about, it reduces the cost. I was with someone yesterday and he does it every year. He loves going out. It's his time to have a look through the paddock, have a look at the pasture, and he's only looking for phosphorus and pH because that's his major costs and that's his concern. And it's, he said it pays him back in spades because he can prioritise which paddock needs phosphorus and he can really see where it's going. So, can't see this either, but so what information has been used to identify the site? So this paddock here is one I coming out of COVID, I got to start meeting some of the customers I signed up whilst I was locked in my room. And this is a paddock down near the little desert down near Horsham, near Neil, actually. Anyway, so we went and had a look at this paddock, and the consultant said the farmer's going out of sheep because Dad's getting old and Dad likes the sheep and the son doesn't like sheep. And Dad's had a triple bypass and they don't want to find Dad up the paddock dead. So this paddock is a very sandy paddock. It's been in pasture a very long time. You can see, is that the pointer? Yeah, you can see paddock boundaries here, and it's all going to go into cropping this year. So we went and had a look at this paddock because it was great. I love going out and seeing different paddocks and what they're doing. It's a very sandy paddock. I've never seen that. Well, if you go to Western Australia, all you do is see sand, but it's a very sandy paddock. But driving around, I was trying to figure out which dam we went past. One of these dams, you could see this black spewy soil coming out of the dam. I think, oh, what happened there? And he goes, Dad, back in the early 80s, had to go delving, and what they did was they just created the dam and just pushed it out with the tractor. It was a very crude way, but there's a way of bringing up the subsoil to create. So when we were looking at this paddock, Marty said, and he's Mr. Technology. He was using everything possible to see if he can identify the changes, and you can really pick up the black areas, all that sort of stuff. And so I think he was going to we're trying to find out whether we could figure out where that clay layer is, because it changed quite considerably in the paddock as well, to see, some management practices. So just looking at that, where would you take your soil sampling site? When you've got 4 paddocks into one, lots of different things happen, what would you do? What things would you do to identify some sites? So, to identify those sampling location is to, number one, use the grower knowledge, and, also what vegetation is growing in the paddock, so you can really identify those changes. And then you can probably do, as you said, maybe in the paddock, but it depends on your conductivity, because sometimes that's pretty bad, so you can't really do too much, but do a bit of a desktop assessment of soil variability. And so I've got a laundry list of all the stuff you can either get from the grower or get free to have a look to see, where those differences are, even before you go visit the paddock. So then you can sort of go and target areas where you can see what is different. So Google Earth, if they've got EM surveys, if they've got that data, log that into somewhere. The available water capacity is available. You've got imagery, data layers. If the farmer does calibrate their header, you can see if you can get yield maps, and now they've got protein maps. So you can really get a lot of data and have a look, which sometimes can be very confusing, but also sometimes can be very useful to help you guide to, locations in the paddock. So, as I said, this guy loves his technology. So this is another paddock, and CSBP Lab also has a product called Decipher Ag, and we have all these layers on there. So we have what we call available water capacity layer. So he's used that to identify some soil sampling sites in certain places. I know he did sampling the other day for some moisture probes. So he used that to see where a good spot to put that moisture probe, so it's more representative to the soil around the place. Other people use NDIV imagery, as you said, and up in that neck of the woods or up a little bit higher near Swan Hill, it's really good to show the dunes and sways. So they're using it to figure out where they're going to do their nitrogen sampling in the low and the high sand areas, because it really correlated well with that. As I mentioned, yield maps, but really want to make sure that it's been calibrated, the machine. We've processed a few yield maps, and the farmer's been a bit disappointed because it's crap, and it was only crap because it hadn't been calibrated. So make sure they've done that work. there's some people can put all that information, all those layers together, and they get a production zone. So there's products to do that as well. So you can sort of do that as to guide your way. Sampling pattern. What do people use? We've talked about grid sampling. What else do you do? How do you do your sampling? Jason talked about clusters, so he's got a spot where he goes and does 5 and then moves to the next spot. What does everyone else do? Do you do a transect? Do you do a random? Do you do a zigzag? What do you do? Random? Zigzag? Sorry? Transect? Yep. Zigzag. Yeah, so as you see, everyone has got their own way of doing it. There's no right or wrong, it's just as long as you can replicate it going forward. Number of cores. I didn't put, I was going to do a bit more from last time I did this presentation, Jason, but yeah, I was a bit tired last night and that one fell out. So I still got this. There's been a lot of work around how many cores you should take. And I don't know, I found a book last night, The Soil Analysis with Austin Brown. He wrote the chapter on it, and it's a really good one to go back. It was a good refresher, actually. And 30 or 40 cores is for majority of the tests. So if you're not taking 30 or 40 cores, you're not really getting enough to make sure you've got a representative sample. So I know that's a lot, but that's what they're recommending. I don't know if that's changed over time, but yeah, that's what we're finding. So I had a friend come to me last year, did sampling, and he had to look at the results, and I got him back and I went, oh, your phosphorus is really high compared to what your nutrient, what you've been putting on. When you took the sample, do you reckon you got the 10 centimetres? He goes, oh, no, I don't think I did. I went, righto, okay, well, righto, next year we'll try and get that 10 centimetres. So he dropped back in this year and said, yep, here we go. And he goes, I don't think I got the full 10 centimetres again, Sue. Do you want to sample them? And I went, oh, it'd be really good if you can go back. And I had just made this little corer, which went down to 10 centimetres. And so he took that, and unbeknownst to me, he put in one sample, which was 0 to I don't know, because he didn't know whether it was 7.5 or 8 or whatever. And the other one was a true 10 centimetres. He took, went back to the same spots and took the 10 centimetres one. And as we can see, really important to get that 10 centimetres, because we look at our phosphorus level has changed considerably, and a few of the others. So it was a good. I use this data now because I think it's great, but it's a good example that he did his own. He went back and had a look, listened to me for a change, and had a look and sort of said, right, I'm going to get the true 10 centimetres, because if he didn't, he would have thought his phosphorus level, coal P, was fine. He wouldn't have to put any phosphorus on. But as you can see, it wasn't fine. And I said, oh, this paddock's pretty crap, isn't it? He goes, yeah. And I said, yeah, it does explain. And then the sampling handling, I think I've already mentioned that. So when you're doing nitrogen and carbon, I don't know how many conversations I've had over this the last 3 months. The options is to air dry it to 40 degrees, keep it cool when you've sampled it, and keep it cool all the way through, and you can send it with some ice bricks. Or the other way is, if you've got an option, heat it and dry it at 105 really quickly, because that'll stop that mineralisation when you've got it in the post. Brad wanted me to chuck these in. So NIRI, near infrared, and mid infrared spectra are two, they're not innovation, they've been around a long time, but they haven't been sort of utilised that much. So I just want to put the difference up there. So your near infrared is a shorter wavelength band, and it's been used really for your plants, forages, your grains and that sort of stuff. So it's well suited for sampling out in the field. Your mid-infrared has got your longer bands, and it's got the potential to pick up some of those properties. So here's what I've got here. Where's this from? It's from Adelaide and University, what they've done, and they've got the R2 factor. So closer to 1 means it's is as good as the lab result. So you can see there, some of them are quite good, but when you talk to our senior chemist, because we do MRI for particle size. Some of the things to remember, it might be, I don't know if it's any cheaper, but, well, really I don't think it is, because you've still got to take a sample and send it to the lab. The other things you've got to consider that it relies on a calibration set, which is within, and it goes with that machine. So that means a calibration set that they've got to do the wet chemistry and load that data into the machine, so when they scan it, they get the results. So you've got to make sure they have a calibration set for your soil type, for your region and so forth. So it's quite expensive to set one up and have that. Another thing the lab, or no, CSB Fertilisers have got, they've got a NIR device, which is analysing your nitrogen, and now it's been calibrated for potassium in your crops, so your 2 cereals and your canola. Now they've had this device since I've started, so 5 years it's been there. They've done thousands and thousands of samples of scanning the plant in the paddock, taking the plant to the lab, analysing it and seeing if the scan matches the result in the lab. Thousands of samples. So it takes a long time to get a calibration set. With NRI out in the paddock, it always depends on, they had issues with time of day, the person using it, all sorts of things. So there's a lot of things. So I know there's a lot of things on the market are out there that will make things quicker and cheaper and everything like that, but there's a caveat to it. So thanks.